Hey guys, today I want to talk about a tweet that I saw from Quincy Larson about the Lambda School. And if you're unfamiliar with Lambda School, it is an online coding bootcamp to help people become software engineers. It's gotten a lot of traction from the coding community because of the appeal where people don't have to pay for their tuition until they get a job. And after they get their job, they pay about 15 to 17% of their salary or until the $30,000 is met. So virtually you only pay once you find a job. I'm going to do a quick read on his tweet that says Lambda School runs tons of ads on Facebook and YouTube. Thousands of people see these ads, sign $30,000 contracts, and quit their jobs to do their online bootcamp. But there's a pattern of dishonesty and people are getting screwed. Warn your friends. And there's an article here that I'm going to just kind of read and give my thoughts about. Full disclaimer, it seems like Quincy Larson is a teacher at the Free Code Camp, and that is a free coding resource where people can learn how to code as well. So I'll leave it up to you to judge his opinions, but what I'm going to be mostly focused on is reading the article. And as I read the article, I'll just give my opinions kind of more ad hoc, and I think that's a little bit more genuine as I'm reading it. So opening up this article, and the first thing it says is the high cost of a free coding bootcamp. Students at Lambda School said the program hasn't delivered on its promise. That seems to be a trend with certain types of bootcamps that exist, especially in 2020. I assume that there's a lot of bootcamps that exist. Some are good, some are bad, and some are going to deliver and some are not. So you have to do a lot of research beforehand, and let's just move forward. Bethany Serber was sleeping on her friend's couch and living out of her car when she first heard about the Lambda School, a buzzy coding bootcamp that promised world-class instructors and a top-tier curriculum. Best of all, it wouldn't cost a cent, at least not up front. The school encouraged students to defer tuition until they landed a stable job, then pay back a share of their income. So yeah, that's the major appeal of Lambda schools, and I know some coding bootcamps have done this. Some coding bootcamps will require you to just pay up front and there could be some kind of payment plan, but others will just wait until you land that first job. And I think from a just black and white perspective, it's a good way to attract students to your coding bootcamp school because there isn't an initial financial commitment. Serber and her boyfriend, an instructor at a local community college, quickly started making plans. She quit her job as a patient service representative at the hospital in Tacoma, Washington, and they moved in together while she took classes. Then when she got a high-paying tech gig, she'd renovate his house and maybe take herself on a vacation. I mean, these are pretty lofty goals to have coming out of a boot camp, but it's always good to dream, I guess. Lambda School offers Serber a chance at a life she never had, one of job opportunities, tech money, prestige. She'd watch as companies like Amazon and Microsoft change the fabric of the Seattle area, bringing massive new developments and six-figure salaries that suck talent from nearby Tacoma. Now she had finally had a chance to be part of that change. Okay, from the beginning, however, the online class wasn't what Serber or her classmates had expected. The instructors changed from week to week and often seemed to have no idea what the students had already covered. The curriculum advertised on the website never fully materialized. The online portal where they were supposed to find their homework assignments rarely matched up with what they were learning. So that is kind of a red flag to me that the instructors are changing from week to week. When I went to coding bootcamp, we had one instructor and 3 TAs. Granted, I was in a bootcamp where we physically had to be there, but the fact that instructors are changing from week to week doesn't sound right to me. And the fact that also the homework doesn't match to what you're learning, that seems kind of off. But going on, some of the changes were things Lambda students had requested. The school prides itself on being incredibly responsive to user feedback, but the constant state of flux proved difficult for first-time designers. So I marked this here and I thought this was kind of weird because the article talks about a coding bootcamp school, but we're talking about designers here. So I marked in red this section here because I'm a little confused on whether or not we're talking about a coding bootcamp or we're talking about a design bootcamp. I know that some coding bootcamps, they kind of expand into the UX and the UI field or data science, but it would be kind of nice to understand if this person was going through the UX route or the coding bootcamp route, because then this title is a little misleading. But moving forward, by January 2020, 6 months into the programs, Cerber's group was in revolt. The program wasn't worth the money. They wrote in a letter to Lambda's leadership. They felt like test subjects in a lab. Many asked to get out of their income sharing agreements, ISAs, they signed, which stipulated they had to hand over 70% of their income once they started making $50,000 or more until their $30,000 tuition was paid off. These ISAs are a bedrock of the Lambda program. They allow students to market itself as accessible computer science education. Okay, so computer science education and design has nothing to do with each other. So this is a little confusing again. Like, are we talking about a design bootcamp or are we talking about a computer science coding bootcamp? Anyways, but critics like Senator Elizabeth Warren have warned that ISAs carry many of the pitfalls of traditional private student loans, with the added danger of deceptive rhetoric and marketing that obscures their true nature. In many ways, programs like Lambda School are Silicon Valley's answer to the problems of mobility and educational access. In the US, where student loan debt is at $1.5 trillion, schools that allow students to defer tuition can fill an important educational gap, but the model is only successful if the curriculum prepares them to land a job. That's pretty important right here. In the case of Lambda's UX program, many students felt like the marketing had promised and the education had underdelivered. I kept thinking next month will be better, Cerber says. Next unit they'll have it fixed. Next unit they'll stop treating us like crap. But so far nothing has changed. So it looks like Cerber took the UX coding bootcamp program. And why is the title talking about free coding bootcamp if the person that they're interviewing is part of the UX program? But with that being said, it looks like the Lambda School is a lot more familiar with their coding bootcamp schools because I've heard good things about it. But maybe once they started getting into the UX and UI of their program, it was still relatively new. And you know what? Like, that's fair. Like, you have to be able to teach a group of people, but at the same time, you kind of have to be a little bit more honest about the marketing, in my opinion. Lambda's intentions appear to be well-meaning. It's also a bit self-serving. Of course, Silicon Valley's solution to upward mobility in education boils down to teaching people how to code. So, like, some red flags again, like, are we talking about people who want to learn how to code, or are we talking about UX and UI design? After all, engineering jobs demand a skilled workforce, and these gigs pay remarkably well, but the stand-up ethos of prioritizing efficiency, speed, and scale is incompatible with many people's ability to actually learn. I think this paragraph makes sense, but at the same time, we're mixing design and coding together, and they're not the same thing. So moving forward, still it's easy to see the appeal of a school built upon a financial agreement that aligns the school's incentives with the goals and aspirations of its students. With the ISA, if a student succeeds in landing the job, the school gets paid. If a student can't find work within 5 years after completing the program, the ISA is automatically dissolved. If we promise someone that our education will help them get a job and we're wrong about that, why should we get paid? His reasoning makes sense on paper. Students who hustle can transform their lives within the 9 months of their online program. Those who don't have spent almost a year without a full-time income, but at least they're not swimming in a pile of debt. Lambda School doesn't just train people, Lambda School bets on them. So one of the things that kind of is a red flag for me here is 9 months of the online program. This seems very long to me, especially if it's a full-time program. You have to understand that, yeah, you're not paying money to attend this bootcamp, but you're also not making any money for 9 months. So that's a pretty crazy time frame for anyone to be learning how to code, or in this case, I guess UX UI, because imagine the pressure of not making money for 9 months and then also trying to become a software engineer. In a way, a part of me says that you have to do your due diligence, right? Like, are you prepared to have 9 months of your life dedicated to learning how to code online? And if you're not, then maybe this isn't the right path for you, regardless of the class being free or not, until you actually get a job. The financial setup is likely why Lambda School has such a diverse group of students. Just gonna skip this part. It just talks about different type of people that attend the coding bootcamp school. World-class curriculum and the practical and symbolic promise of the ISA. Okay. Lambda offers these students the opportunity to become team leads while taking classes. A single Lambda cohort can have upwards of 60 people, but students start and end their day in small clusters, while leaders facilitating group discussions. Caleb Hicks, who heads up Lambda's learning department, said this model makes sense on a couple of levels. You don't need a PhD to teach you how to tie your shoes, he tells The Verge. You just need someone who knows how to tie your shoes. The model allows Lambdas to scale. Team leads make roughly $13 an hour, a more reasonable price tag than a full-time instructor. We can't have an instructor for every group. You can't run a business like that. Few red flags here. That analogy about having a PhD to tie your shoes, but you just need to find someone that knows how to tie your shoes. That's not a good comparison, because you're supposed to be learning from a program that's supposed to be world-class. And if you're just finding someone that more or less just graduated, maybe a cohort behind you, that doesn't mean that the teachers themselves are world-class. These people are probably just as new as you are. And another thing that kind of threw me off a little bit is saying that we can't have an instructor for every group. You can't run a business like that. I get that coding bootcamp schools are a business, but to not even put in the resource to have good instructors teach the course is a red flag to me, because at least when I attended Flatiron School, the main instructor had more than just 1 or 2 cohorts worth of experience. And the fact that it says that you can't have an instructor because it just financially doesn't make sense. Maybe you have too many students. Maybe too many students are attending your school. But by cheating out your students, by hiring someone that has less than a year or 2 experience to teach a class of 60 seems kind of misleading, in my opinion. And I think this is kind of concerning to me. Let's move on, I guess. Alfred and Hicks have taken pains to understand what students are going through and create a resource to help. In 2019, Lambda offered 50 students a living stipend. Okay, so it's just trying to make up for some of the financial burdens. And school gave out a report that said that 86% of the Lambda graduates are hired within 180 days. If you're a student who shows up and work hard, we'll never give up on you ever. It's clear he really believes that. This article is pretty long, so I highly recommend you to just kind of read the full list. But in my opinion, I think there are some holes in the article itself where it kind of doesn't really. It's kind of confusing to me, because it's a lot of the students that they seem to interview are part of the UX program. And the title itself is saying the high cost of a free coding bootcamp. Yes, like Lambda School does have a UX program. It also has a coding bootcamp, but it would be nice to be able to kind of specify what program is having an issue with the Lambda School versus just kind of grouping them all together. It seems like the UX program at Lambda School is not quite there yet in terms of getting people prepared to become full-time designers. In my opinion, it is a little concerning, because if we learned anything about marketing and how strong and powerful marketing can be, people are spending their personal time and they're quitting their jobs with the idea of becoming a full-time designer, changing professions. But if your program isn't up to par with, say, your coding curriculum, then you need to be really honest about that. And I would like to compare this to kind of the UCI law school program, where they provided the first year students free tuition from beginning to the end because they weren't accredited. And to get people to attend their school, they needed a way to appeal to them to say, hey, like, we're not quite there yet, but in return, we'll give you this curriculum for free. And I think if Lambda School was a little bit more honest and maybe even reduced their ISAs down to 15,000 or something like that, at least for the first 3 cohorts, so they can iron out their curriculum and kind of fine tune what was working and what wasn't, then maybe even though those students were struggling with the lack of cohesion and things like that, they knew themselves what they were getting themselves into. And it's just really kind of breaks my heart to see some comments like, I'm grateful for the opportunity that Lambda has given me to improve my life, but that doesn't mean they get to waste my time. I'm paying for this, and Lambda needs to provide the quality product they promise. 3 months later, the interim UX product manager announced that they were pausing the enrollment in the UX program so they could improve the curriculum. You have all provided us with an incredible amount and quality of feedback, and we'll be using it to inform our curriculum efforts. Nishida was relieved for future students, but the news didn't really help him. He and his classmates began using Twitter to complain about their experience and urged Lambda to dissolve their ISAs. Yeah, this kind of goes back to being just honest about your program, right? If your program isn't quite there, you can't expect the same return that you would normally get from your coding bootcamp students. So I think there is room for improvement for the Lambda school for their UX program, and it looks like they're making some initial steps forward for improving that. The article itself, I wish that they were a little bit more honest about just what is the issue with Lambda school, and it seems like it's specific to their design curriculum. And I know that there's some comments about here about how they interviewed some like iOS guru or something of 16 years programming experience, and saying that like they will never find a job after they finish this curriculum. But I think in general, companies that hire coding bootcamp graduates shouldn't have the same expectations of hiring like a mid to senior level developer, right? Generally, junior developers are going to get paid a little bit less, but you invest your resources on them to become a better developer, and in return they'll grow, and they may be paid a little less, but at least they're making a contribution to the repository and to the project itself. So yeah, obviously they're not gonna fare the same way as like a engineer who's been doing it for 5 to 6 years. These are people that have been doing it under a year, so like a lot of companies should come with that expectation of knowing what they're getting. And I think it's kind of unfair to be like, hey, this guy wouldn't even pass a first round technical interview. That's not a right way to approach, in my opinion, coding bootcamp graduates. And then we scroll down here, and then talks about like trusting the process in general. Like I said, I really highly recommend you to read this article. What is a little kind of scary here is that apparently the school wants to expand its field into cybersecurity and nursing. Cybersecurity I get, but nursing seems a little off to me, so I hope that that's not the case. I feel like you need to get a credit of some sort to provide nursing services, but I'll leave that alone. So in summary, I think the article did a good job interviewing, people that attended the UX program. I'm not a big fan of this title that's saying the high cost of a free coding bootcamp. Let's call it the high cost of a free UX bootcamp, because most of the people that they interviewed and most of the issues look like it was coming from a UX bootcamp school. So yeah, these are my thoughts about the article on the Lambda school, the high cost of a free coding bootcamp. So specific for anyone watching this video that are aspiring to be developers or UX UI designers, thinking that a bootcamp is the way to go, in my opinion, you really need to do your due diligence before you attend. Think about the cost and the time that it will take for you to become a software engineer or developer. And in my opinion, if you're not doing that due diligence of, hey, how many cohorts have graduated from your bootcamp, or how new is this program that you guys created? How many cohorts have there been? These are kind of like the tough questions that you should be asking these schools before you attend, because some schools will require you to pay upfront. And if you're going to be paying $12,000 to $15,000 without doing any research about what happens when I graduate and I finish my curriculum, do you help me find a job? Do you introduce me to the companies that would accept junior developers? Am I gonna have to just go on Indeed or hire myself and basically hustle? Things like that are really important questions to ask, because you know what? There are a lot of coding bootcamps out there. And if you're not doing that research, no matter how hard you try, maybe you'll never be able to land that job because the structure around your curriculum and your program wasn't really well suited. There are really good coding bootcamps out there, but there are also really bad ones too, right? And I'm not gonna name what are good and bad, but you have to pick the right coding bootcamp school, or you have to pick the right UX UI bootcamp school for you. And I think that is an important lesson here, is you have to do your due diligence. I want to end on a positive note and say that it is really inspiring to me to see aspiring developers hustle and try to figure out what is best for them. And I encourage you to kind of figure out what is a great way for you to learn. Some people like doing the self-study route and doing the online route. Some people like coding bootcamp schools. I would love to hear from you on how you are learning how to code. And if you can add them in the comments below, I would greatly appreciate that. And if you like content like this, hit a like and subscribe. I am trying out this new format again of just like reading articles, or maybe something new in JavaScript, or maybe something new that's happening in the coding community. If you like content like this, again, hit that like and subscribe. Until then, Tech Rally out, and I'll see you later.